No? Nearly. I left my cup of water. Never mind. Okay. All right. So any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Good. Go, Gloria. Good. Good, darling. Talk to me. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah, done. I think we're there. Thanks. When Robina dies, yes.
Okay, Robina dies.
Yep.
Whatever it is that goes to the bardo,
What?
Your mind.
Yes,
Is it your
the mind,
mind
consciousness,
that
yes.
goes to the bardo
Yes,
and reincarnates?
yeah.
Let's say you go to a point where you can remember all the names that you had previously, or
Yes,
the life that
yes, yes.
that mind, is it real? Is it permanent, impermanent? Is it?
Okay, first, what do you mean by real? What do you mean by real? What do you mean by real, Gloria? There's a big can of worms you're opening.
That is constant because, okay, Robina dies and has died many, many times. Those bodies are no longer here. They do not exist. Okay. But there is something that exists. That
mind,
is
consciousness.
Your mind.
Consciousness.
Your consciousness.
Okay, the simplest way to talk about what Buddha's view of the mind is that it's this Gloria, for example, is the name we give, as we know, right now to this package, isn't it? And the package basically has got body and there's mind. This is the way Buddha talks. Your mind is not physical. Okay, when we think of something not physical, we would tend to think it's a spirit or a soul and something a bit mysterious. Buddha doesn't talk like that. He says, you've got this mind. So there's different ways of talking about it. And the simplest way in this context is to think of it as a river of mental moments. So now you know very well, if you had perfect memory, you could track back in perfect memory every second of what Gloria was thinking between now and when you got up this morning. That would be possible, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Now, even if you don't remember most of the day, and most of us don't remember most of the day, we know logically, even though we don't remember, our mind was working away at 7:03 this morning, wasn't it? But we don't remember it. So consciousness or mind are the same meaning. It's this ability to cognize. It's this continuity of mental moments that you keep tracking it back. And if you kept tracking back, you'd know you'd go in an unbroken chain of mental moments. You'd got to go right back to the first second of conception in your mummy's womb. You'd keep tracking it back to then, wouldn't you? And then the question is, well, where did that come from? Well, you know the egg and sperm were in your mummy and daddy's bodies, weren't they, a moment before conception? And the Buddha would say you can track back that same continuity of mind, but at a subtler level, because there's levels of consciousness, obviously to the previous moment of that continuity of mind. And a few weeks before that, it was in a previous body. And then you got to conception there, and you keep tracking and tracking. And of course, logically, he says you've got to keep tracking it back, and you will never find a first moment. There can't be, because it's the product of cause and effect. And there can be never a first moment where you say there was nothing before it. You can't have such a thing. Nothing like that exists. Right? So this consciousness also is the second thing about your consciousness. Every microsecond it's doing something. And the Buddha would put it in a very simple way. It's either doing something virtuous, non-virtuous, or neither. Pretty simple way of saying it. The non-virtuous ones have this particular characteristic of being based in the ego grasping. Whether that mind's in an ant body, dog body, giraffe body, or human body, Buddhist psychology refers to all the same, no difference. And so this ego grasping drives all the mad things we do, causes us suffering, causes us to see nonsense, and causes us to harm others. And in the long term is the motor that keeps propelling us forward, like a maniac, and then that causes more birth, another birth, and another birth, and another birth. So we're creating our own experiences moment by moment, and this keeps on going until we break the cycle. So this is where the delusions come in, understanding these neuroses in our mind. Another way of talking about the mind now is in terms of our experiences moment by moment. And this is what we must learn to recognize, because this is what runs us. If it's true, as the Buddha is saying, that all suffering experiences find their root in past neuroses in that mind, because he says it's a natural law that delusions and neuroses and non-virtue and the voices of ego basically will produce future suffering. It's their nature. Because they're related to fear and negativity. It's just their nature. And virtuous thoughts, virtuous actions will produce happiness. And this is not punishment and reward, because for in the Buddha, there's no one up there pulling the strings. There's no one up there running the show. There's no judge. There's no person like that. It's just this is a natural law that all minds do. which is why we have to learn to know our own mind. Because if I am experiencing my own experiences now, all my happiness and all my suffering is the fruit of what I have done, then I'm in charge, baby. Stop blaming everybody else, start taking responsibility and changing what's in my mind, because I'm sick of suffering. I don't want more suffering. This is sort of the basis of a Buddhist practice, this sense of accountability. So by changing my mind, practicing virtue, learning to be my own therapist, going deeper and deeper into my mind, getting rid of all the voices of ego, eliminating all of this, cutting fear, causing happiness, bliss, joy, going beyond negative karma. Now I can choose to do exactly what I like, and this is where the compassion part comes in. Now, knowing I found my own liberation, now I can be of benefit to others, because we're all in the same boat together, suffering. So consciousness is this beginningless and endless continuity of mental moments, the Buddha is saying. And whatever we do, say, and think every second is what programs it and produces the experience at any given moment. So it's a bit shocking what he's saying. To think that you're in charge of your own life is kind of a brand new idea. It's either mummy and daddy or it's God, isn't it? This is an interesting concept. It's very empowering. Rather, it's empowering because I've got to be in charge, got to be on top of it. I've got to be the one responsible, which means I've got to be aware. I've got to be my own therapist. I've got to go deep into my mind to find out what the hell's going on in there. That's the idea.
Yeah, but then you have to be careful that you don't do good things because you want to get a better life, because then I'll be attached to better things. But if I am
start again, Gloria.
Okay.
What did you just say?
I constantly think about this. Okay, if I am a good person and try to be compassionate
That's right.
and do
That's
everything
right.
as
Yes.
best as I can,
That's right.
isn't it attachment to good things? Because then I think, okay, this will help me to get a better life
Gloria.
next time.
We've got to take ourselves at our own level. When you hear, like we were talking in the week, hear the level of compassion that we're capable of achieving, which is completely beyond ego, that's way too high. We can't go there first. You've got to go through stages. So the very first level of compassion we've got to get is to see the advantages to ourselves. I mean, right now we're doing stupid things to harm ourselves. At least do good things to benefit ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. That's really just plain intelligence. Eventually, you go beyond that and you do it truly out of altruism, but that's way to go. So I always remember when I heard these teachings, I said this last week, when I heard these teachings about what we're capable of, the levels of compassion that we're capable of, I thought these Tibetans were crazy. It seemed too high, Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like walking around being saints, which in a sense is what a bodhisattva is. It's just a Sanskrit word that we'd call saint, basically. And so Buddha's saying we can all become this. So it's too high almost. So when I heard all this, it was too much for my mind. And I remember that I heard His Holiness say, and I've quoted this, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. So it's intelligent to do this. But eventually, as you increase and you go beyond ego, it gets beyond doing it for yourself. But we've got to go one step at a time, baby. So how sensible that you're going to be kind to others because you get the benefit. My goodness, the world would be a happy place. How unbelievable. And that's a really valid top of argument to use in some of the discussions about developing, getting rid of selfishness and self-centeredness, is to look at the logic of how the disadvantages to us of being self-centered. I mean, think of people who are very selfish. Nobody likes them. They fight with everybody. Their life's a misery. I mean, if we get a bit of a wake-up call from that, would be very logical. Well, I better be a nice person. I mean, not in a manipulative sense, but in a very obvious sense. And often the Dalai Lama, when he's talking to countries and governments, especially to the United States, he'd gently, politely remind them that being nice to your neighbours is an advantage to you. Look what happens when you're mean to your neighbours. Nobody likes you. So it's obvious that we can see this, but we're so disconnected, I think, from our own sense of self that we don't realise that we're causing our own suffering, because we think it's everybody else who's causing our suffering, isn't it? Yeah. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's very empowering to see that, my goodness, being self-centered, being miserable, being angry, being depressed all the time only brings me more misery. And this is something I think is very profound if we could get it. But our problem is, when we're angry, depressed, jealous, we really believe that someone else is doing it to me. We don't think we play a role. So to wake up to this in the very first level of practice, to realise that being angry, being jealous, and this is Buddha's point about karma. This is a fundamental point. That okay, this is where, let's go into this again, remember. You know, our usual view of morality, you know, because we've brought up as Christians, for example, Muslims, whatever, the usual view, or indeed as materialists, with mummy and daddy running the show, the government, the police, the judges, we have this sort of dualistic view of morality. And we really have this very strongly, especially when it comes to religion. We have this feeling that it's imposed from something on high. That's why we resist it. That's why we resent it. Don't tell me what to do, we'll say. Do you understand my point here? It's very strong inside us. But the Buddha's view of, and I checked on this, I remember I mentioned this, I asked a Catholic priest, a friend, I said, tell me what a sin is, define a sin for me. He said, it's going against the will of God. It's a very powerful point. That by definition, a bad action is one that God says is what you shouldn't do. So a sin is when you do what he doesn't tell you to do. And the same with when you're in the household. I'm a naughty girl, and, you know, I'm a naughty girl because mummy said. But the Buddhist view of morality, he says a natural law. That a bad action has got nothing to do with the fact that he said it. It's got to do with the fact that people don't like being harmed. If you do your market research in this room, we're going to find nobody likes being kicked in the teeth, bad-mouthed, having their girlfriend cheated on. You know, do you understand my point? We don't like it. So this is obvious. That's how you define a negative action for the Buddha. But like we discussed, I think, on Thursday, this is a really major point. When I do a negative action, what causes it to be negative karma for me isn't the mere fact that it's wrong or even that it harms another. It's the fact that I have in my heart the wish to harm. We talked about the killing of the mouse business, you know. The reason I create negative karma when I kill something is because I want to harm it. So that wanting to harm, which is called anger, that's what pollutes my mind. And that's what the Buddha is saying. That's what causes me future suffering. I program my mind in negativity. So it's not come some moral idea from the sky. Oh, it's wrong because somebody said. It's too vague, you know. It's wrong because it harms others. But when I do it, I create negativity because my motivation, my anger, my jealousy, my attachment. That's the point. So then in this sense, is what I'm getting at, when we can begin to understand that what I think and I do and I say, that is what produces my experiences. But we're so addicted to this feeling of being separate and that we're the product of someone else and that it's someone else's blame. This is how we try, like children, try to get away with things, you know. It's childish, Buddha's view. So it's quite tough. Even the first level of practice, which is to practice morality, which sounds pretty normal, but the reason for the Buddha is very tasty. It's because that is what makes you happy. When we realize this, we have real respect for ourselves. So Gloria, it's a perfect thing to think. Okay, if we end up doing it in a manipulative way, because we're greedy, then it won't last long. But to be reasonable, the real point is to recognize every time you're angry and you're jealous, forget about what you do to others. You're harming yourself. And this is very hard to get. So I remember we were having a discussion last week, or the week before, when I was somewhere else. And we were looking into the whole business of killing cockroaches, killing the mice, whatever, the creatures we think it's okay to kill, and we can't help but kill, and can't I kill, and it's not fair, and I must kill, and I don't know what to do, how can I not kill, blah, blah. We keep trying to find a way to get away with it, to be told it's okay to kill. But it's a bit sort of like going to your doctor. Isn't there some way I can smoke cigarettes without getting cancer? Don't you think I could try and smoke it without getting cancer? Or, you know, or if you have this deep allergy to peanuts and you vomit every time you eat them, trying to ask someone to give you permission to eat peanuts. I'm sorry, it's a natural law that if you eat peanuts, you're going to vomit. You can't avoid it, you know. It's a natural thing, not a punishment thing. So we have a view of morality that's like a punishment thing. So we're wanting that same person to give us permission to do something. Are you with me, people? And it's rather childish. So this idea of accountability is quite powerful, really. Means I've got to be accountable. I've got to know that whatever I do, this is what Buddha's saying about karma, that whatever I do will sow a seed in my mind and produce my future experiences. So I have to, given that I'm attempting to live according to what Buddha's view is, I'm taking it on board as my working hypothesis. You know, I've got to do that because I can't see it's true yet, what he's saying. So I've got to use it as my basis. Then if he says that killing, and then I look into my mind when I kill, I have to see that if I kill, it's out of anger. It's out of self-centeredness. So if anger and self-centeredness are going to harm me, good enough, even that is enough for me not to want to do it. Even that is enough for me not to want to do it. Not to mention the more abstract idea that every thought I have sows a seed that will grow and ripen as future experiences similar to the action. This is even harder. But if I think about it and use it as my basis, then obviously because I don't want more suffering, I'm going to do everything I can not to kill. For my sake. Eventually it'll be genuine compassion for the other too. But you've got to start with yourself. You've got to start with yourself, Gloria. When you have real respect for yourself, Buddha's saying, which means accountability, realizing you're in charge of your own life, that means it's like compassion for yourself. That's very intelligent. And then you can transfer it to others. Do you understand? So it's excellent. Don't worry about it. It's brilliant. So sensible. We've been doing dumb things that hurt us, thinking we're making ourselves happy for so long. Let's try good things for a change. Give up killing, lying, stealing. I mean, we're the recipients of this, and the bonus is that people get happy because we don't harm them. Or as Lama Zopa says, if you make a decision not to kill, the beneficiary is you, but the rats and roaches will all have a party because you leave them in peace, Lucky rats and roaches. Actually, I remember in Montana where they have the deer shooting season. There's a particular, I've read about it, there's a block of some piece of land where the owners refuse to let hunting. So the deer all know, and they all come there in the hunting season. They come and live in the field where they know they won't get killed. Isn't that amazing? They know that they don't get killed there, so they all rush off to this little place until the hunting season's over. And they leave again. I think it's amazing. Wow. So anyway, the rats and roaches will have a party if we leave them in peace. So the one of karma, we're sort of surprised to think that would be a good way to think to help us understand emptiness, but it really is a powerful one. Can you kind of see that? Because if you realize that the consequence of this ego business is self-pity, misery, not fair, poor me, always moaning, always complaining, blaming everybody else. Can you hear that part we recognize, right? Well, when you think about karma, that counteracts that. It makes us grow up. It makes us strong and brave and accountable and stop blaming others. And that's how it's so helpful to understand about, therefore there's no I from its own side. At the very first level, dependent arising in terms of causes and conditions, The second one is more subtle. It demands we know our minds well. So the biggest practice there, really in the second level of dependent arising, that there's no I that doesn't depend upon parts, there's no I separate from parts. The biggest teaching, the biggest learning here is to develop this incredible awareness and clarity about our own thoughts. Because this idea, like I said before, that if every thought we have should be a thought that's in sync with reality, it makes sense. I mean, it's like if you're learning mathematics, every thought you have that's related to mathematics has to fit with mathematics, doesn't it? It can't just be random, weird thoughts, like I said before. But we're so used to having random, weird thoughts, thinking it's normal to have random, weird thoughts. Well, Buddha says it's mental illness, and we don't need to have it. We can have that same level of clarity and precision that Gloria has when she plays music, that you have when you learn computers or learn driving. We get it when it comes to scientific, physical, artistic, creative things. But when it comes to emotional things, we're like beyond ridiculous, We all even think, it's my mind. I'm allowed to think what I like. Like, in other words, I'm allowed to think that 1 and 1 is 19. Yeah, you are allowed to think 1 and 1 is 19, but you'll be in big trouble. You won't communicate with anybody. You'll go crazy. So why not have thoughts that are in sync with reality? This is not how we tend to think of our feelings and emotions, But it's a very powerful one. So that if we really do want to try and sort out facts from fiction, I like to say it, that means we have to hear our thoughts. And they're going to such subtle degrees. So it's not an easy job. In fact, to have this, we have to have some focus. And that means we've got to be on the alert as much as we can to listen to all the crazy thoughts before they get to the level of emotion. So when there's no awareness of your mind, like in my life, there was no awareness of my mind. I wasn't taught it. I wasn't given introspective techniques. Well, I was religious. I was completely in love with God, Our Lady, the saints. I go to Mass every day. I did all that, but I didn't know how to translate it into knowing my mind, you know? So I didn't know I was angry until the words were vomiting out the mouth. Now, some of you don't maybe get angry, but you don't know you're depressed until you can't get out of bed one morning. But that's a bit late, you see, and that's our trouble. Our culture, we think, you know, when you're really practically having a mental breakdown, then you think it's time to go to the therapist. Well, it's a bit late. You know, way too late, I'm sorry. It's like driving on the freeway at 120 k's an hour, whatever you drive here. We call them k's in Australia, so we shorten everything. A k's a kilometre. Oh, you go M's. What do you say? How many? You go miles. We shorten everything in Australia. We call them k's for kilometres. Anyway, you're driving. It's as if you're driving on the freeway at 120 kilometres an hour, and you're about to crash, and you discover you can't drive. That's how we are now. We're living our lives having no idea about our minds, having no idea about happiness, sadness, love, generosity, whose fault, my fault, his fault, whose fault. We're just lost, and we wonder why we have problems. We can't drive. So we've got to go back to basics and learn to know our own mind and start being in charge of what the hell comes out our mouth and everything else, you know. And that demands listening to our thoughts. Being our own therapist is absolutely incredible. But it takes masses of work. And this is where emptiness comes in. The more and more we can hear our thoughts, okay? So one of the big distinctions is between a so-called virtuous thought and the non-virtuous, which means the neurotic, needy, anxiety thought, jealous thought, depressed thought, low self-esteem thought, hurt thought, not fair, poor me thought. You get my point, people? We have these all the time. And then distinguish between those and the genuinely virtuous thoughts of wanting to be kind, loving, blah, 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 you know? And we've got them. This is how come we're in this room instead of the gun club. We've got them, there's no question. But they're so mixed up for us now. There's like a big soup of emotion. You with me? I mean, the fact is, we've all got delusions. It's the same as the animals, the same as the psychos and the terrorists. But our saving grace is that we've got a few virtues that we can access. Aren't we fortunate? I mean, the Buddha would say it's because we practiced really hard in morality and goodness and generosity in a past life, that we can just access that kindness. We can have a good sense of conscience. We can recognize what is good and what is bad. It's because we've practiced it really hard in the past. How fortunate we are. How fortunate we are, you know. So fortunate, because we've got access to our virtue, which are habits in our mind. So what we're trying to do is grow those. But our key job is to really make this distinction between what seems just like this big lump of me, you know. I'm generous, I'm kind, I'm fat, I'm this. We don't really give much distinction to all the thoughts. We've got this very vague sense of me. So we've got to listen to the pieces much more precisely. We've got to put the microscope of our own mind onto our thoughts and begin to be able to distinguish in this soup of emotion. Oh, there's a jealous thought. There's an angry one. That's attached one. That's kindness, but it's very mixed with attachment. Be careful, Robina. That's generous. That's this one. You understand? We've got to really have clinical understanding of all these endless thoughts and start giving labels, accurate labels to them. This is the recipe for sanity. It really just takes time. It just takes time. Our problem, one of the big problems of doing this job, is because we're so addicted to looking out there. We're looking at him and her and them all the time, never stopping, assessing what they're all doing. We've got to look, turn the spotlight inside. Huge job. It's not natural to us. It's not natural to us, I tell you. We've got to really learn to practice this. And then what I'm getting to in relation to looking for the I, when we're really wanting to understand emptiness, then one of the excellent techniques in the day, I was saying to Gloria roughly, the millisecond, another way to say it now, the millisecond the I doesn't get what it wants, you know. Instead of, like let's say, the smallest thing, could be the tiniest thing on the road and some fellow drives in front of you. And straight away what we do is, like I said, we launch into the description of what that guy just did. how dare he, blah, blah, blah. You know, already you've missed the opportunity. You've missed the opportunity. Because that second, if we're really trying to look at to the I, and your point, what it is, she's still there, yeah. What's your name? Enid. Enid's point. Then you're going to be so glad when a bad thing happens. You actually be pleased because it's the trigger for you to catch, that second to catch the story as it pops up. And because that moment is when you'll feel the I strongly. If you're driving along feeling all relaxed and easygoing, there's no feeling of I. Are you with me? But the moment the I gets disturbed, the anger rises, the annoyance, the irritation, the frustration, the jealousy, the hurt, even a mild one. That's the opportunity to catch it and not look out there, but look in here. And hear what's being said. Catch it, the story, the words. It takes time, but this is powerful because then you can begin to discriminate between the thoughts that are ridiculous thoughts that have no basis, which exaggerate and distort reality, and the ones that are reasonable. This is already an incredible practice. And this, in other words, distinguishing between the virtuous and the non-virtuous thoughts. And then you begin to see that the negative ones, you know, the feeling is true. We have a strong feeling. The feeling is true, but it's just the symptom of these ridiculous, exaggerated thoughts. And when you realize that all the negative ones, by definition, exaggerate. That's their nature. They exaggerate. That's their nature. You know a person, don't even think about yourself, but you know people, some people who are very emotional, angry easily, jealous easily, depressed. Depression's harder to see, but the volatile emotions. You can hear them. They're always exaggerating everything. You know, especially if you don't see things the same way, you think, God, they're so ridiculous. They're so good. Or they go on about things, you know, because the delusions exaggerate. So you can see it when a person really gets angry easily. They just don't have an emotion, but they over-exaggerate the bad thing. Like the red light comes, it's like an atomic bomb got dropped on them. It's a red light, you know. You can understand. You see what I'm saying? All delusions, not the physical, but the story in the head that informs the physical emotion, is an exaggerated description of the event. To see this is to at least see the characteristic of all the delusions, and then we can get to see the more subtle one, the more primordial one, which is labeled simply ego grasping, colloquially, for the word ignorance, for the root delusion that over-exaggerates everything. So the way this ignorance functions, okay? Ignorance is an interesting term. It's just a regular old word, but like all these terms, it's got a very specific definition. So the way it works is this, you know. So if I look at this glass, I might go, oh, that's a pretty glass, you know. So straight away, attachment is arising, and it's then over-exaggerating its prettiness, which then instantly brings wanting it for me, right? And then the manipulating to get it and all those dramas that come as a result of attachment. So then someone else, let's say Veronica, looks at it, and she sees an ugly glass because she likes pink glasses and it's red, you know. Whatever. Then suddenly her mind is over-exaggerating its ugliness. Well, this is obvious. We can see this all the time. You know, our mummies used to tell us, it's a very profound statement, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, so is ugliness. It's the same. It's what Buddha's saying. We make everything up, you know. But we don't think we make it up, because I don't think I exaggerate the beauty of the glass. I think the glass is beautiful. So the ignorance is doing that. Bad enough that I over-exaggerate its deliciousness, but because it's informed by the root delusion called ignorance, which is what we don't notice, that causes the glass to appear inherently delicious. Delicious out there. Delicious from its own side. Delicious in and of itself. Delicious inherently, delicious intrinsically, self-existently delicious. These are all synonyms for the mistake that ignorance makes, that informs all the other delusions. Ignorance just doesn't function on its own. It informs all the other delusions. So seeing as if like the chocolate cake. It's like it is for us. It's out there, isn't it? So delicious. And you look at the feeling, like especially if food is one of your attachments, you know, maybe you're not attached to food. I'm attached to food, right? So, you know, it's one of my attachments. So anyway, what it means is attachment is thinks about it when it's not there. That's hilarious, really, isn't it? We spend all our lives thinking about things that aren't there, planning to get them, wishing we had them, if only we didn't, and blah, 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 you know. But thinking about it when it's not there, and when it's there, it's just like this. It's exactly like this. This is how it is, and this is the ignorance part. The attachment part makes it look delicious. My mind, my attachment makes it look delicious. That's a shock already, because we don't think it's my mind making it delicious. We think it's delicious in itself. Like as if when you made it, you put 2 eggs, the chocolate, the flour, and deliciousness, a spoon of deliciousness into it. We really believe it's this way. That's the ignorance part. It's seen as self-existently delicious, meaning I'm sitting here, innocent victim, and this cake comes along. And there it is, looking delicious, begging me to eat it. What's it got to do with me? It's not my fault, is it? Isn't it? This is how attachment is. We talked about this. That's seeing it as self-existent. It's out there. Nothing to do with me. I'm this innocent victim and this delicious cake comes. And equally the ugly thing. Nothing to do with me. This ugly person comes along and says mean words. This is how it feels to have ego grasping. I'm this innocent victim of that delicious thing and the ugly thing. In other words, we blame people for making us suffer, but we equally blame people for making us happy. It's exactly the same function. We dump it on them. That's what ignorance causes us to do. There's a separate me, separate you, and you're doing it to me. It's all done to me. That's the way it feels, and that's the function of ego grasping. It's all out there. I'm this innocent victim. Everything happens to me. We recognize this, I'm sure. That's the product. That's the result of this ego grasping. Attachment makes it look more delicious than it is. Ego grasping, ignorance, informs it with it's out there from its own side delicious. Innocent victim. Meaning, nothing to do with me labeling it. Nothing to do with my mind. That's all it means. Nothing to do with my mind. This is a helpful way to think about emptiness. We can hear this. Another one is so tasty. We start to analyze. This is what Buddha's saying in the Heart Sutra. We have to analyze repeatedly with everything in the universe. And so one very interesting way is when we look into how we establish things as existing even conventionally. This is why this conventional ultimate way of things existing is very, very tasty. So like I said before, what's that, Mummy? Well, darling, that's called a glass. What's a glass? It's that flat-bottom container that holds my water. Now, we can agree that that's the definition of this product. So we didn't know this before, did we? And so, in fact, you think about this, where did that definition come from? Where did this glass come from? Not out of the sky, fully developed as a glass, not self-existent glass. It was the creation of human minds. So we have called it that. It functions as that. We agree it's that. That's conventional reality. That's what it means, conventionally existent. And the Buddha's saying there's nothing that doesn't exist like that. And this is subtle dependent arising, that it's come from the mind. I will say, I am going to prison. And straight away you'll go, oh no, Robina, that's terrible. Why? Oh, why? It's just a sound. I am going to prison. If you don't speak English, it's just a blur, isn't it? Meaningless words. You guys say it in Spanish, I wouldn't have a clue. It's a sound out the mouth, isn't it? Sound. But look at the meaning we put into it. I, already that one. Am, we know what that. Going, we mean going that way. To, we mean that. And then prison. Straight away, we buy into, we agree on the conventional definition of every one of those phrases. We know the meaning. We've all heard them. We buy into it. We accept what I is. We accept what am is. We accept what going is, to is, and prison is. We accept every one of these. We've dissected. We've agreed. We've shaken hands. And that's a conventional statement of truth. Conventionally, because we have agreed it is that. So if you're looking up the real estate, in Craigslist or wherever you look these days, for a house to live, and you see a free house in a prison, I don't think you'll go, oh, look, I can get free rent. Oh, I'll go there. I don't think so. Why? Because, not prison. Why? Because prison is, if you've never heard of prison, you've never heard, it's the definition of prison is an ugly house where you're sent because you're naughty. Let's say that's the definition of prison, where you're not allowed to get out. No one knows that by looking. It just looks like an ugly house with barbed wire on the top, isn't it? If you don't know the definition, you wouldn't know that. If you've never heard of the concept of prison, you walk into prison, and some even are quite pleasant. I went to some have got gardens and everything. In Australia, one ladies' prison, they had their own houses and their own kitchen and gardens. It looked a really nice place to live, and it was free rent. But no one was happy for them. Why? Because we call it bad. Why? Because you're naughty. You just went to police, you went to court, you got arrested, and now you're called a criminal. But what do all those words mean? Police, criminal, court. Unpack every one. Unpack every one. They're all dependent arisings. They're words we've made up. They belong to a certain thing which conventionally is true. But the more you analyse, you won't find anything there. This is why they talk about everything is like an illusion. We say in English, it's great, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's a very powerful phrase. This is the appearance of prison. It is, conventionally, that is the definition of prison. An ugly place where you're sent, where you're not allowed to get out. But, the point the Buddha's making, if it were that from its own side, if it were that in its bones, if it were that inherently, if it were that without depending on the thought that called it that, it could never, ever, ever, you could never, ever, ever be happy there. And my friend Mitch, like I mentioned last week, on death row in Kentucky, in his red jumpsuit, like the worst place on earth to live, it sounds like death row, close to his death date. And he's a happy guy. He feels fortunate. He doesn't have to work. He gets his clothes laundered. He gets his meals cooked. He doesn't have to pay rent. The taxpayers pay for him. He spends all day doing his jobs, doing his practice, helping people, looking after the psychos on death row, and he's a happy guy. So if prison were inherently, in its bones, actually, from its own side, definitely, permanently, inherently ugly, it's not possible to ever see it in another way. You could never call it anything else, but he can, which proves it's empty. This is subtly dependent arising. There's nothing, Buddha says, that exists outside of the name, the label, the thought, the description, the definition, the idea, concept. Everything that does exist exists within that. Within the fact that we call it that, and that it functions as that. It must be valid. It's a name given to a valid base. So cup, glass is a valid, that's the valid base for the name glass. This is how you even establish a conventional existence. You say it is a glass. What is a glass? You define it, the flat-bottomed, clear container that holds my water. That's not enough yet. You've got to prove it fits the definition. So I get the water, and I pour it in. But even there's one more thing you're supposed to do, and check that there aren't any other valid cognitions, valid thoughts that contradict that. When there aren't, you can then check, tick the box, all shake hands, write the contract, agree. That's a glass. That, Buddha says, is how everything in the universe exists. Hell realms, God realms, enlightenment, nose, toilet, whatever is posited as existing, you label it, you define it, fits the definition, we agree. That's how everything exists. But Buddha's saying we're not happy with that. We want there to be more. It panics us to think like this. So we impose upon it characteristics that it doesn't possess and that the Buddha says could not possibly exist there. And that is why we suffer, because we are believing there are qualities in things that couldn't ever possibly be there, but which we believe are there. And that's where the conflict is. And that's why we go mad. That's why we create negative karma. That's why we suffer. Because of this disconnect between what we think and what's true. This is what insanity is. This is what samsara is. This is what the negative karma is coming from. This one, this disconnect. So we have to see our mind. We have to hear every thought. And we have to be able to distinguish, is it a valid thought or not? And the not valid ones eventually, and this is Buddha's outrageous point, they have no place in our mind. They're adventitious. They're adventitious, this word you don't even use in our ordinary life. You've got to look up the dictionary. It means not at the core of our being. This is Buddha's entire point. This informs his practice from day one, that all minds have the capability to be in sync with reality. That all minds have the capability to remove from that mind the thoughts that aren't valid, the thoughts that aren't in sync with reality. They are not at the core of our being, those thoughts. They're the cause of all suffering, and they're adventitious. And that's what nirvana means. And that's why we have to see our minds. That's why we have to understand Buddha's model of the mind. We must. We have to. No choice. This is the job to be done. This kind of level of clarity and precision. And of course, without it, Buddha says, without concentration, it's a literal impossibility. Why in the long term, to do this job properly, we have to get single point of concentration, this marvelous technique that the Hindus invented, centuries ago. Because the thoughts are so, the non-valid thoughts, the neurotic thoughts, the thoughts that don't have a basis in reality, the delusions, the neuroses, are so ingrained, so habitual, so primordial. It really, really takes time to unpack, deconstruct, and then finally rid the mind of them. And the more we understand this, the more we understand logically how we can become enlightened. Because an enlightened mind is a mind that's rid itself of all neuroses. It's not just some emotional idea. It's a logical thing, Buddha says. So this is why we have to understand the way the mind works in Buddhist psychology. Buddha's view, Buddha's model is very specific. This particular, like I'm saying, this particular function of the neuroses, the emotional component we know about, the fear, the distressing part we know about. But the delusional part is hard for us to see because we so believe in the stories. It's hard to see that they're not true. When Danielle's eyes are so bad, when he never sees red ever for a second, all he ever sees is blue, it's very hard for him to forget that what he's seeing isn't true. If he saw red for 5 minutes every day, every time he saw blue again, he'd remember the mistake. But when you only ever see the mistake, we're addicted to it, and not only do we think it's like that, but we believe it's like that. That's the part that keeps us locked into samsara. So we have to understand this very specific point in Buddhist psychology, that the delusions have this characteristic of being conceptual, liars, misconceptions. It's tough to see. We have to hear. So the proof, it sounds so, a simple example again, but the Buddha's saying, Buddha's saying all the delusions are adventitious. This is extraordinary finding. All neuroses, all misconceptions, all disturbing emotions, all delusions are adventitious. They are not, meaning they're not integral to who we are. They're not necessary. They're unnecessary. We don't need them. They don't belong. They're not at the core of our being. Therefore, the logic is they can be extracted from our mind. When we get that concept, that idea, that's pretty tasty. Then we can begin to understand how there are some thoughts we have in our mind that are valid, meaning they're in sync with reality. And there are some that aren't valid, which means they're not in sync with reality. So that's easy to prove when we have simple things like, I say there are 2 glasses on my table. Conventionally speaking, we know that's not true. That's an invalid thought. That's a delusion in my mind. I have a thought that says there are 2 glasses on my table. We know it's not true. So, this can prove now how you can become enlightened, which means a mind that's free of all lies, which is a mind that is rid of delusions. So you point out the mistake to me. You remind me of my mathematics. You remind me. And you say, no, Robina, remember the maths, 1 is 1, and then 2 is 2 like this, 1, 2. And I'll go, oh, you're absolutely right, I'll say, you're right. There's 1 cup on my table, 1 glass on my table. So that's a possibility, isn't it? We know that's a possibility, isn't it? We know it's possible, don't we, to see the truth, yeah? We know that? Okay, so before, I had a thought in my mind, didn't I? There are 2 glasses on my table. I had that thought in my mind. You showed me some logic. I agreed with you, and I concluded there's 1 glass on my table, which we accept as the conventional truth. Now, what happened to the thought? There are 2 glasses on my table. Where'd it go? What happened to it? Huh? People? What happened to it? Simple. What happened to it? Huh? Vanished. Yeah. Gone. Totally. And what made it go? What made it go from my mind? What made it leave my mind? Huh? So who said it? The truth, yeah. The truth. So if I was going, are you sure? Isn't that 2? Nah, that's probably 1. That would be doubt, wouldn't it? And the 2 thoughts would be sitting there. This is called doubt. Many people go crazy with doubt. You never know what's right. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do... You're familiar? Well, you have these 2 thoughts sitting side by side. No wonder we're crazy, yeah? You can never work out if it's 1 or 2. That would be quite distressing, wouldn't it? We have that all the time, isn't it? So you've got to come to a decision, don't you? Not just a feeling, oh, I'll just do this and think it's right. No. You've got to use logic. And logic here is called numbers. So you point it out to me, we go through it, I'm prepared to listen, I listen, and I am now clear, and I'm convinced of the truth. That seeing the truth is what causes the lie to go. Do you see that? That's how you get enlightened. Exactly like that. Can you hear that or not? Because an enlightened mind, that's why don't put it in the sky somewhere, please. Don't reify it, it's disgusting. Which is what we love to do with religion. Oh, it's so beyond, wow, far out, amazing. Rubbish. Shut up, Enid. The point is, this is what Buddha's saying. This is why Buddha's so shocking, He's so outrageous. He's saying, hey, babies, you can all become a Buddha. And what's a Buddha? Well, when you're Buddha, Gloria, when you're Buddha, dear, your mind's going to pervade the universe. You'll see everything that exists. You'll see all the minds of all sentient beings, all the past and all the future. You'll know all their karma ever since the beginning of this time. You'll have infinite compassion for every single one. And the bonus is you'll be able to manifest your mind in millions of forms throughout millions of universes for millions of eons for the sake of these suffering millions of sentient beings. Now, that's a Buddha. And that's what your mind is like when you've removed all the lies. So the lies must be pretty deep, mustn't they? You get my drift? You people don't talk to me. Yes. Are you guys really normally this polite? Are they being polite or something? This is typical Puerto Ricans. You're very traditional, quiet little people. Wow, amazing. You all just make you good Catholics, I think. It was very funny in our centre in Melbourne, Tara Institute, it used to be a Catholic church. And it's got this stained glass and everything, and so now we have Buddhist classes there. And of course, the altar, where the altar was, is where the throne is, and people sit there. And then when my sister Julie, who doesn't even like going to church, she came there, she was too scared to walk on the altar part. No, I can't walk there, she said. It's the altar. It was just this deeply ingrained in her mind, you know. She didn't want to go too close. Oh, no, that's the altar, she said. I can't go there. Anyway, so the point is, what I'm getting at here is, it's surprising to us, is what I'm saying, to hear that these huge emotions and guilt and rage and hurt and blame and shame and attachment and junkie, these things we see are driving so many humans to think that they're misconceptions. It almost seems like a joke, doesn't it? And that's what we've got to see. That's the unique approach of Buddhist psychology. And I think even for most Buddhists, we're not clear about this. I mean, like I was joking to Veronica recently, I just said most people think Buddhist psychology is about being mindful. Excuse me, it's so disgusting to think that. It's embarrassing. I'm sorry. I mean, nothing wrong with mindfulness. But as Nama Zopa likes to point out, thieves need mindfulness. So don't get too excited. Buddhist psychology is amazing, you know, but it's kind of hidden to most of us. Are you with me? Yes. So we've got to start looking, you know, but we've got to learn it first. Nuts and bolts. Learn the word. I remember when I first heard these words, I first learned low rig. It was boring. Attachment is a delusion that over-exaggerates the good things and will cause you suffering. Oh yeah, don't recognise that one. It's taken even any talking that I can do about it now. It grows slowly, you know. It takes time to see this the workings of this mind of ours, you know. As Lama Yeshe says, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year, you know. We'll never begin to understand it until we start looking deeply inside. And the fact is, too, the way we think even of attachment is like, you know, a cute little thing that means, oh, I like chocolate cake. But we were talking last night, actually, and really, it's got multiple facets. So the first level of attachment is like the level of energy. We're born with this huge, from past attachment, it multiplies every time you get reborn. It grows massively. And the first level of attachment, which we wouldn't even label attachment in our culture, but this is the product of past attachment, is that you're born with this incredible feeling of dissatisfaction, an aching feeling. And look at some of us, it's really seriously deep. We call this self-loathing. We call this low self-esteem. It's just terrible. Or if you get, you know, okay, you've got this deep sense of dissatisfaction. So then the next level of it naturally has to be, if I'm dissatisfied, I'm then going to hanker after something, aren't I, to fill up the gaping hole. That's the gross and obvious level of attachment. And then you're going to have 75 different varieties of that, depending on the other qualities in a person's mind. So, you know, you might see a person, we talked about this last night, who's anorexic. Then you're going to see a junkie. Then you're going to see a pedophile. Then you're going to see a thief. We necessarily wouldn't think they're all suffering from the same disease, but they are. It's called attachment. But each person's got a different sort of other set of characteristics that impact upon the attachment. Let's say, or another person, for example, you've got a person, you know, who is, even creativity is a function of attachment, where it embellishes sound and things. So a person is very clever at being creative. That's a function, actually, of this bare bones conceptuality that embellishes something. But you, let's say, get a person who's got a lot of attachment, but very kind of gross level, attached to sex, attached to food, you know, attached to the sense objects, who maybe add to this maybe not so intelligent, then add to this maybe not very kind, add to that they lie, then that's a particular kind of person. Then you have another person with even more attachment, but they're truthful, they're moral, they're kind. You get what I'm saying? There's so many pieces to one person. You've got lots of good qualities in there, but this person's got masses of attachment, but they've got morality and they work with it. You're going to see a very powerful person there. Each person is different because each piece. We've got all these bits, like all these bricks that make up a person. Some people have more morality. Some people have more lying. Some people have more greed. Some people have more, all these different qualities. So you look like all these different people with different problems, but they look like they're different. In the West, we all call them different problems. But they're all the same. They're all because of attachment, but manifesting in a different way. Some people into the sense objects. Some people are attached to killing fish. Some people are attached to torturing. Some people are attached to eating food. Some people are attached to having a thin body. Some people are attached to alcohol. Some people are attached to money. Some people are attached to getting what they want. I'm one of them. I don't care about money, drugs, houses, boyfriends. I look like I'm, and renounced. Forget it. I like to make things happen and have them done my way. You kind of agree, see what I'm saying? You've got all these different packages, but the fundamentals of Buddhist psychology have not changed in 2,500 years. And if this Buddhist psychological model is enough to get you enlightened, I've got a feeling it's enough to work on depression and anorexia and everything else. Are we communicating here? Yes. Good. Okay. Yeah. It's only 5 o'clock. I feel like I've been talking all day. Okay, that's my job, I suppose, isn't it? Any questions, folks? Come on, questions, please. Anybody? Who, where, which? Yes, go. What's your name, my dear? Jose, go on. Tell me your question, Jose. Microphone. See, Jose.
There's a term that you've used that I'm not sure if I'm getting the term right and I don't understand the term correctly.
Yeah.
Dependent rising.
Okay, all right. Okay. Okay. Like we're saying, the actual way, the ultimate, the word for how things exist, finally, ultimately, the term for it is emptiness. That there is no glass from its own side. The glass is completely empty of existing inherently. There's nothing from the side of the glass. This is the words for it. And the shorthand for that is emptiness. Okay? Just the words. That's ultimate. Ultimate. Then you've got how the glass does exist conventionally. Right? So the Buddha says, and we can see this, glass, which we define as that flat-bottom container that holds my water, does exist in dependence upon various factors. So the term for that is dependent arising. That glass arises, comes into being, exists in dependence upon, first, countless causes and conditions. This is the one of karma we were talking about for people, right? So I remember when I first heard about dependent arising from my philosophy teacher, he said that the object called Robina, which is obviously why I remember it, I was the object. He said it can be said that everything in the universe up to the first moment of Robina is validly a cause and a condition for the existence of Robina. And it's fairly evident. You can prove it. Once you start looking at the causes of this phenomenon or that phenomenon, it's the same. One of the first causes for me is her mother, right? Would you agree? So then clearly there wouldn't be a mother if she didn't have a mother, and then she wouldn't have a mother if she didn't have a mother, and you keep going back to beginningless mothers. That's just the mothers. And then there's the fathers. Then there's all the other conditions that had to be in place in order for the person called Robina to exist, right? So it's really obvious if you start to analyse a glass, you're going to go back to the first moment of this universe because you're never going to stop. Every time you posit a cause of this, you've got to posit the cause of that, and then the cause of this, and then the cause of that, and the cause of this. So this is the simple way they talk about how everything in the universe is, using it as a noun, is a dependent arising, or is an interdependent phenomenon, or exists depending upon something. Do you understand? And this is the flip side of emptiness. As Lama Yeshe put it, thinking about how everything comes into existence or exists in dependence upon this and this and this is the proof that therefore there is no glass from its own side. Because ego instinctively is thinking, although we don't realize we're thinking it, that there is a glass that does exist out there from its own side, having nothing to do with anything else. We don't think we think this, but Buddha says this is what we think. So thinking about how glass comes into existence in dependence upon all the causes and conditions is the first logical argument out of the three to prove how, therefore, there is no glass from its own side. Jose? All right? Good enough? Good. Then the second, the more subtle one, the second level of dependent arising is the one we did with the self, which is the good one. That there is no Jose. There's no Jose among the parts. Like we thought before, Jose, has a nose. So there's, we think, so okay, again, my way of putting this one about the thoughts, okay? So in Jose's thought, in his mind, you say to yourself, I have an ear, a nose, and a hand. You can say that thought, can't you? You're going to say that thought, and it's a valid thought generally, isn't it? Because you can point to Jose, we can point to the ear generally. But if we analyze it, Buddha says, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. Because we can say, can't we, this is one way of talking about it. In Jose's mind, he just heard the thoughts and he writes them down. I have a hand, a nose, and a foot. So those four things. Now, naturally, because you've got the thoughts, eye, hand, nose, foot, whatever, then those thoughts will point to four separate phenomena, like we said before. We think this. But we realize that you can point conventionally on Jose, you can point to the nose, you can point to the ear, you can point to the hand. But we assume there's another little piece in there called Jose the owner, the mini Jose, the mini me in there. We think like that. Or we think, another way to put it is all your thoughts in there. We think there's a landlord called Jose who's kind of running the show. A vague way to put it. We really believe that little Jose is in there. And then when someone punches you in the nose, how dare you do that to me? Whereas Pabonka Rinpoche said, when you nearly fall down the mountain, you don't say, oh, my body nearly fell down the mountain. You go, I nearly fell down the mountain. So the Buddha's saying we are over-exaggerating the I. There is a Jose. No argument. There's a Jose that's made of many parts. There's a Jose that's the result of causes and conditions. There's even in the subtlest dependent arising, Jose based upon the name Jose. But all Buddha's saying is you're not going to be able to find an individual, clear, self-existent, definite piece called Jose that isn't everything else, that doesn't depend upon thoughts and that doesn't depend upon causes and conditions. These are the three classic ways of thinking about dependent arising, about interdependence, about how there is no glass or Jose or piece of, or knee or cloth or clock or anything that exists, or enlightenment or prison that doesn't exist like this. So thinking about how things exist in dependence upon causes, in dependence upon parts, in dependence upon the thought labeling it is the way to think about how things exist as dependent arisings. This is not a noun we'd use properly in English, it's just we're turning it into a noun. Things arise in dependence upon many, many factors. So dependent arising is said to be conventional truth, and emptiness is the conclusion you come to by thinking about these things. Is that clear, Jose? A little bit? All right. Listen, they study this for 30 years in the monasteries, and then they meditate for another 30 to get it. So be patient, please. Just keep listening. Keep squeezing our brains, as Lummy, as she says. I'll just talk in here like this, I think. That'll do. Maybe we should all go home. Look, it's time to go home. Come on. Goodbye. Any more questions? Maybe we could do a little meditation to calm us down. What do you think? Yeah? Let's do a little meditation and go home, okay? Any more questions before? Yes, sweetheart. Yes, darling. Here, where's the microphone? Give her the microphone. Thank you. I'll give it to her.
I'm a bad catcher.
You're a good catcher, darling. Talk to me. It's on.
There are some persons following the teaching through internet, and one of them has a question.
Yeah, please. Who is it? What's their name?
His name is Toledo. Is his
Toledo.
last name, but
Hello, Toledo. I'm here.
Well, his question is, what is the difference between the Buddhist Tathagata Garbha and the Hinduist Atman? Are the same or different?
Don't ask me. What's a Tathagata? What is it? I've never heard. I speak English. Is it? Yeah. Oh, okay, good. If he means Buddha nature, and the difference between that and what?
And the Hinduist Atman.
That's like asking the difference between oranges and apples. There's no relationship at all. Okay, Buddha. Okay, that's interesting. Eh? How about that? I know. Yeah, nothing. No, not even the remotest relationship. Nothing to do. Not even remotely. It's like saying, doesn't matter. Thank you, Toledo. Who's Toledo? Okay, let me try and answer your question, Toledo. Okay, the Hindu position of an Atma, a soul, a self, an I, is this first position, and indeed the second one, that there is an I that can be found that isn't the aggregates. So in other words, the Christian teaching is that you've got a body and a mind and a soul. That's the point. It's very simple. That there is another component there that makes you the person you are, that is permanent and is given to you by God. The Hindus may be slightly different, but as a variation on that view. And that's Buddha's exact argument that you can't find that one. So that's that. Then the Buddha nature, if that's what Tathagata, what is it? Tata what? That's what it means. Okay, if it means Buddha nature, then that's very simple. Buddha nature, the ultimate Buddha nature, and what they mean by that is the emptiness of yourself. And why, in other words, what they're saying there is that you exist because you are empty. Things exist because they are empty of existing inherently. And then the second one, the conventional Buddha nature is the mere conventional, the capacity that you've got to accomplish Buddhahood and the working on your mind day to day. So there's no relationship between these things. Buddha nature, in other words, is not some special little secret part of yourself, which is what Toledo's questions seem to indicate. And if I'm wrong, he can email me back and tell me I'm wrong. But there's nothing like that. It's not a question of that. Emptiness of your mind is the ultimate Buddha nature, which means you can emptiness of yourself, because things exist in general, Buddha says, because they are empty. Because emptiness is dependent arising. Dependent arising and emptiness are like flip sides of the same cause, of the same coin, you know. The final middle way is when you realize these two simultaneously. Because right now, for us, they're contradictory. They're the two extreme views. Every time we hear emptiness, we go, oh, there's nothing there. Every time we hear dependent arising, we go, oh, thank God there's something there. Both are extreme. Neither is valid. Middle way is that there is a cup that does exist upon this and that. And that proves, therefore, there is no cup that is inherent. Because inherent means not depending. That's, yeah. And the Atma is the one that Buddha says exactly is not existing, which is something inherent. Buddha says nothing inherent can exist. It's an impossibility. It's an utter and complete and total impossibility. Yeah. What else? Any more questions?
Yes, Maria Isabel is her name.
Who?
And she's
Who?
asking, Maria Isabel.
Maria Isabel.
Yes.
Hello, Maria Isabel.
She's asking if when you recite mantras, are you attached to the sound that permits you to develop the quality you want to reach?
What is she? Can she answer us? Is she listening to us now? Can she answer the question?
Yes, yes.
What does she mean by, are you attached to it? What does she mean by that?
Well,
Or she's emailing.
Okay,
You have to
I'll
email
ask
her.
her, but I don't know if she's going to answer right now.
You have to email her. Oh. So she's not listening.
Can I ask something
Yeah, go on. Sure.
in the meantime?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So therefore, the mind also is empty.
Yes.
Okay.
There can be nothing that exists
Yeah.
that isn't.
Exactly.
Impossibility. Nothing.
Nothing.
And all the Buddhist schools, up to the Prasangika Madhyamika, you've got these different levels of Buddhist schools. You've got the ones that all argue with the first view. The next lot all argue with but the third one is the subtle dependent arising, and that only the Prasangika Madhyamika. There's all these different schools of thought. All the others say there has to be something there that can be pointed to as the self. And this final view, which seems nihilistic, says there cannot possibly be anything that does exist, that exists outside of the thoughts, naming it. As Lama Zopa says, it's the subtlest one, the hardest one to find. Yeah, of course. Because anything that's inherent means it doesn't depend on anything. And anything we can think in our own life, nothing exists that doesn't depend on something. It's a simple way to put it. Yeah. Impossibility. Nothing there. Well, roughly speaking, her question again. Say it again. Just say it out loud. Is she just simply saying that the very saying of the mantra is what causes you to get the meaning?
If you are attached to the quality you want to develop through the reciting of the mantra.
She means attachment as a delusion, does she? You're assuming that.
I'm assuming that, but I'm
Well,
not sure.
If there's mostly attachment, you don't get any qualities. You can't. Attachment is pollution. If she just means the saying of it all the time, simply the saying of it, of course, that's the practice of getting it. Of course it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Don't know. She doesn't say that, does she? But she's not there anymore.
I'm not sure.
Okay, darling. Okay. Any other questions before we do our meditation and go home? Yeah. Yeah. Someone. Yes.
Why does Buddha say in the sutra that there is no ignorance and there is no end to ignorance? No ignorance
No,
and
that's right. There's no, he says there's no,
Or
he says there's no, yeah. Let's just quote him exactly.
there's no ignorance nor end of ignorance.
Maybe in your translation, I don't know, mine's different. Hang on a second. I can't hear it. Hang on a tick. I'll get you this one. Well, George translated
It's like in the
this one.
second or third paragraph.
All right, hang on, darling. Oh, there's no, oh, that's right. Yeah, there's no, that's right. So towards the end, this one?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance. Oh, that's right, exactly. There is no, all he's saying when he says there's no anything, no visual form, no sound, no smoke, no sound, there's no I, no ear, there's no ignorance and no extinction. What he means is there's no inherent ignorance. But he's doubled, just to make sure we really have got it right, there is extinction of ignorance, right? But there's no inherent extinction of ignorance. That's all he's saying. So there's no inherent ignorance, and to be really sure, he's saying, and there's no inherent extinction of ignorance. There is ignorance, but not from its own side. There is extinction of ignorance, but not from its own side. So all he means is there's no inherent ignorance and there's no extinction. There's no inherent extinction of ignorance. Just double checking we got it right. That even the emptiness, even the absence of ignorance is also empty. You with me? Okay, that's all. And there's no extinction of aging and death. He means there is extinction of aging and death, right? Okay, there is a visual form conventionally. There is an eye, an ear, a nose, a body, right, conventionally. But there's no inherent eye, no inherent ear, no inherent nose. There is ignorance, cause of all suffering, and we can eliminate it, which means the extinction of ignorance when you realize emptiness, right? But there is no inherent extinction of ignorance. That's all he's saying. Does that make sense? Doesn't it?
Yes.
That makes sense, people? Good. Anything else? Anything else? Zan, any questions? Anesh, any questions?
I have another, I have another question.
Sasha, any questions? Indy, any questions? No questions? Okay. Come on, everybody.
So even enlightenment is...
Of course. Does it? Okay. Let's just try it out. Does enlightenment exist? Let's assume it does. Can we assume it does? Because Buddha's suggesting it does, right?
Yeah.
So therefore we can state that it does exist. So we have to give the definition, the name, the definition, right? So that's a conventional truth. It exists conventionally. It's dependent upon things, right?
Yeah.
What's it dependent on?
Realizing...
Causes. Causes.
Yeah.
So it's the first level.
But
It's
also the
it does exist in dependence upon causes, right?
Yeah.
So therefore it's a dependent arising. Therefore it has no inherent nature.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, because there's no beginning and there's no...
That's not the
ending
discussion.
to-
That's not
to
relevant.
anything.
That's not the point. That's nothing to do with it. That's a complete red herring.
Okay.
That threw me completely. Why did you say that?
Why am I saying that?
That's not relevant to anything. Why did that come in? What happened? How'd that come?
Because it's like when you keep on looking, for something, you never...
That's
you
not
will
the
never find...
No, that's not what we're saying. But you said it's beginning and endless. Why did you say that?
Is that you are never going to finish, going to the point that, okay, there it is. That's what I meant.
No what?
You can
Which one you're talking
keep
about?
on trying to find and you will never find.
Which one? Which object are you
Buddhahood.
talking about?
Yeah, Buddhahood. Or anything. Absolutely anything.
Oh, I think we're really getting to a can of worms here. Would you say that statement again, please? What are you saying is your logical reason for why Buddhahood is empty? You're saying because you what? Say it again. So you posited the object called enlightenment.
Exactly.
And you asked, is it empty?
Is it empty?
And then I
Yes.
said, is it dependent arising? Is it a result of causes? And you
Yeah,
agreed that it
definitely.
is.
Yeah.
So then I said, good, that proves it's therefore empty of inherent existence. And
Exactly.
then you said it's beginningless and endless. And then that's what threw me.
No,
So
but
what's that
because-
saying?
Okay. What I was trying to say
Yeah.
is that since since
Enlightenment.
has causes, also those causes have causes.
But that's not the discussion
and-
here. We're not discussing that. That was something else.
therefore it's
No, but that's not the
empty.
point here. We're looking at the object called enlightenment.
Okay.
So there's an object called enlightenment. One of the logical reasons for why it is also empty of existing without depending on anything is that it does exist in dependence on some causes. Do you accept that?
Yeah.
That's enough.
Okay.
I happened to make that other statement before, that it can be said that everything in the universe up to the first moment of enlightenment, / Robina in this case, is a cause. But that was to prove there are countless causes, that's all.
Yeah.
Not because you keep going back and back.
Okay.
So the point here was, all we needed is one reason to show that enlightenment, like a glass or a person, does exist, and to prove that it is empty of inherent existence, one proof is that it does exist in dependence upon causes. So what is one of the causes of the phenomenon called enlightenment?
Realizing emptiness.
Good. So that's one cause. Enough to prove, therefore, it does not exist without depending on something. That's enough to prove it. That's it. Don't go further.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Something else over here. Somebody had something. I heard a noise from a mouth. Come on, no more. Okay, let's do a little space out meditation for 5 minutes, okay? It's so boring you think you're not doing anything. So just close your eyes, sit up straight, okay? Don't slump into your chair if you're in a chair. Have your feet firmly planted on the ground. And we'll just go through the classic sitting position. If you're sitting full lotus position on the floor, great. That's the perfect position to really get all your subtler energies aligned nicely. But if we're not sitting in full lotus, sit with one leg up. If not that, then ordinary cross-legged. If not that, like some of us, in chairs. Okay. So the next point will be your legs. The next one is your back. And all the meditators say your back should be very straight. Think of your spine like an arrow, ramrod straight, okay? The coccyx is the head of the arrow pointing into the earth. So then the next thing they say, your shoulders. Well, your hands, okay, the classic one is like this, with the left hand here, and then the right hand like this, see? This is a classic one, with the two thumbs here, touching. I've heard there's two subtle channels related to bodhicitta at the tips of the thumbs, like this. Otherwise, you see yogis putting their hands like this. You do what you like, okay? Your hands. The third one is your shoulders. Huh? Shoulders, okay? Shoulders very square, not slumped. And I like to think of it this way. Think of your entire skeleton, actually, like hanging on a hanger. It's ramrod straight, isn't it? Your bones are completely straight. That's how your body should be. But then all the flesh and the muscles are kind of like hanging on those bones, very relaxed. So it's really important to have the body upright, because at the subtler level we have these subtle channels, and the airs, all the wind energies, the prana, travels through all those channels, and our mind is connected to those air, those wind energies. So it needs to be not slumped. Very upright is excellent. And then your head is the most important, they say. Your chin should slightly be tucked in. Your head tilted slightly forward. And the jaw relaxed. Best, they say, to have your lips apart and have the tip of the tongue resting behind the top teeth. They say that's the best way to not have to dribble and have too much spit, you know, when you're really meditating seriously. Apparently. So, your tip of your tongue behind your top teeth, breathing through your nose, and then finally your eyes. Best to have them looking down. And ideally, all the meditators say to have your eyes open, because then if in the daytime, the light comes in and it keeps your mind very sharp, which is very important. But obviously for most of us, we get too distracted. So maybe just for these few minutes, have your eyes closed or have lightly closed. But underneath your eyelids, having your eyeballs looking down, as if you're looking along your nose at the ground. So to settle now into this position, very unself-consciously. Relax. And remember, though, your body doesn't meditate. It's just we need the body in a conducive position. That's really important. Your mind meditates. The body's, in fact, in the way, you know, this big lump of stuff. So anyway, now we're going to just do something really simple for 5 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, good quality. You're going to be focusing not on the breath, which is an external object. We're going to focus on our thoughts. So you just have one part of your mind, awareness, attention, if you like. Attention is one of the many parts of your mind. So imagine that you've got your attention focused very strongly on whatever pops up in your mind. Don't make it pop up. Don't think about the thoughts. Don't analyze the thoughts. Don't judge the thoughts. Don't get involved in the thoughts. It's almost like you're watching television with no opinions. Just observe your thoughts, okay? Whatever arises, let it come and let it go. That's it. But super focused. Do not lose focus for 1 second. Make a strong determination. You won't space out. You're going to be really focused. This attention focused on your thoughts. That's it for a few minutes. Don't space out. Just stay focused on your thoughts. Let them come, let them go. Okay, relax now. You see, whatever object you use is the same idea here, whether it's the breath, your thoughts, a visualization. I mean, there's more benefit in having a visualization, there's more power, but the idea from our side is to simply focus and not do what the mind naturally does, which never stops chatting, you know. I mean, the chatting will happen, but the first level of success is let the chatting happen and you don't buy into it. That's fantastic. You step back a bit. That's already marvelous, because then you'll get more chances to listen to what the thoughts are saying. If you're really locked into the thoughts and chatting away mindlessly, you don't notice what they're saying. You're too close. You've got to step back. And don't be scared that your mind is going on, because but at least you start to see it. Then you can start to listen and label accurately and begin to distinguish. That's the part that takes time, you know, to make sense of what we're seeing, what we're listening to, and then to start the arguing and the adjusting, fixing the thoughts, you know. This is what the job is. All right. I think we can go. Don't you think? Time? Enough? I know. I discovered that I really do say much more words than most people. I discovered that. People all the time, when people transcribe like an hour and a half talk I give, it takes like 36 pages. Somebody just sent me a transcript of, a 2-hour talk. And most people's are 8 pages apparently. And mine was 36. So that must be very exhausting. I always say that, and I did try to talk slowly. In the beginning I did. I succeeded in the beginning, didn't I? Talking slowly? I did. Maybe I only did about 20,000 words. Maybe it's value for money, except you don't pay any money, do you? So I'm so stupid, I'm sorry. Thank you, everybody. I'll see some of you tomorrow. We delight in what we've just done. Shall we delight in what we've just done? Rejoicing. All these thoughts, all these seeds we planted. Remember the way Buddha's talking. Not a single thought goes astray, okay? Which is both scary and fantastic. Not a single thought goes astray. Everyone sows a seed. So it's scary and fantastic. So good, all this hard work we've done today, nearly 4 hours, non-stop, all these thinking, all these amazing thoughts, helping us see the meaning of reality, looking into our minds, taking responsibility, lessening ego. How amazing, how marvelous. Be delighted, okay? And never give up, never give up. That's the one, never give up. And dedicate all this virtue we've planted in the mind, may it ripen as quickly as possible, exactly as we motivated in the beginning, in the development of our amazing potential for the sake of sentient beings. Okay.
Madre Tare, liberando del samsara. Tu Tare, liberando de los 8 temores. Tara, Madre que libera. Por favor, otorga el don de la longevidad. Por las bendiciones de los gurus, raíz y del linaje, por los logros espirituales de los Yidan, dioses y diosas, por los métodos hábiles de las dakinis y los protectores del Dharma, que podamos realizar gozosamente la esencia de nuestras esperanzas. Gendun Tenzin, eres afable, benevolente y bondadoso. Por favor, permanece con nosotros durante una larga vida. Expande tus actividades iluminadas en todas las direcciones y continúa madurando y sustentándonos a mí y a todos los seres sintientes. Desde este momento y durante todas nuestras vidas, manténnos bajo tu tutela. Sé nuestro amigo, nuestro divino y virtuoso guía. Limpia la degeneración de la ignorancia. Ayúdanos a realizar rápidamente nuestro recorrido por los senderos y caminos y a alcanzar los 3 cuerpos de un Buda. Por la verdad de la realidad incambiable y por la bendición conjunta de la indestructible Sangha, que la esencia de estas oraciones se logre rápidamente. Que por los méritos de esta virtud pueda alcanzar rápidamente el estado de un Guru Buda y pueda llevar a este estado a todo ser sin excepción. La mente de iluminación es suprema y muy preciada, que donde no ha surgido surja, que donde ha surgido no disminuya, que cobre cada vez más fuerza. La visión correcta del vacío es suprema y muy preciada, que donde no ha surgido surja, que donde ha surgido no disminuya, que cobre cada vez más fuerza. Así como el valiente Manjushri y Samantabhadra distinguieron los fenómenos tal cual son, Yo también dedico estos méritos en la mejor forma, siguiendo su ejemplo perfecto. Dedico todas estas raíces de virtud con la dedicación que es considerada la mejor por los victoriosos asidos de los 3 tiempos para poder realizar todas las buenas obras.
Gente, recuérdense que estamos rifando un iPad mini, así que si quieren, solamente por $5 te puedes ganar un iPad. Las taquillas las tiene ella, esa señora ahí de la camisa azul. Así que si quieren participar, ¿sabes? Van a ayudar mucho el centro y pueden ganarse un iPad. Bye.
Esperamos que todos hayan escrito su nombre y el email para poderles enviar la información.
When you hear, like we were talking in the week, hear the level of compassion that we're capable of achieving, which is completely beyond ego, that's way too high. We can't go there first. You've got to go through stages. So the very first level of compassion we've got to get is to see the advantages to ourselves. I mean, right now we're doing stupid things to harm ourselves. At least do good things to benefit ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. That's really just plain intelligence. Eventually, you go beyond that and you do it truly out of altruism, but that's way to go. So I always remember when I heard these teachings, I said this last week, when I heard these teachings about what we're capable of, the levels of compassion that we're capable of, I thought these Tibetans were crazy. It seemed too high, you know. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like walking around being saints, which in a sense is what a bodhisattva is. It's a Sanskrit word that we'd call saint, basically. And so Buddha's saying we can all become this. So it's too high almost. So when I heard all this, it was too much for my mind. And I remember that I heard His Holiness say, and I've quoted this, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. So it's intelligent to do this. But eventually, as you increase and you go beyond ego, it gets beyond doing it for yourself. But we've got to go one step at a time, baby. So how sensible that you're going to be kind to others because you get the benefit. My goodness, the world would be a happy place. How unbelievable. And that's a really valid top of argument to use in some of the discussions about developing, getting rid of selfishness and self-centeredness, is to look at the logic of how the disadvantages to us of being self-centered. I mean, think of people you know who are very selfish. Nobody likes them. They fight with everybody. Their life's a misery. I mean, if we get a bit of a wake-up call from that, would be very logical. Well, I better be a nice person. I mean, not in a manipulative sense, but in a very obvious sense. And often the Dalai Lama, when he's talking to countries and governments, especially to the United States, he'd gently, politely remind them that being nice to your neighbours is an advantage to you. Look what happens when you're mean to your neighbours. Nobody likes you. So it's obvious that we can see this, but we're so disconnected, I think, from our own sense of self that we don't realise that we're causing our own suffering, because we think it's everybody else who's causing our suffering, isn't it? Yeah. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's very empowering to see that, my goodness, you know, being self-centered, being miserable, being angry, being depressed all the time only brings me more misery. And this is something I think is all here? Yes? Okay. No? Nearly. I left my cup and water. Okay. Is there any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Good. Go, Gloria. Good. Good, darling. Talk to me. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah, done. I think we're there. Thanks. When Robina dies, yes.
Okay, Robina dies.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that goes to the bardo,
What?
Your mind.
Yes,
Is it your
the mind,
mind that,
consciousness,
that
yes.
goes to the bardo
Yes,
and reincarnates?
yeah.
Let's say you go to a point where you can remember all the names that you had previously, or
Yes,
the life that
yes, yes.
that mind, is it real? Is it permanent, impermanent? Is it?
Okay, first, what do you mean by real? What do you mean by real? What do you mean by real, Gloria? There's a big can of worms you're opening.
That is constant because, okay, Robina dies and has died many, many times. Those bodies are no longer here. They do not
Right.
exist.
Okay.
But there is something that exists. That
Mind,
is
consciousness.
your mind.
Consciousness.
Your
Okay, the
consciousness.
simplest way to talk about what Buddha's view of the mind is that it's this Gloria, for example, is the name we give, as we know, right now to this package, isn't it? And the package basically has got body and there's mind. This is the way Buddha talks. Your mind is not physical. Okay, when we think of something not physical, we would tend to think it's a mind now, is in terms of our experiences moment by moment. And this is what we must learn to recognize, because this is what runs us. If it's true, as the Buddha is saying, that all suffering experiences find their root in past neuroses in that mind, because he says it's a natural law that delusions and neuroses and non-virtue and the voices of ego basically will produce future suffering. It's their nature. Because they're related to fear and negativity. It's just their nature. And virtuous thoughts, virtuous actions will produce happiness. And this is not punishment and reward, because for in the Buddha, there's no one up there pulling the strings. There's no one up there running the show. There's no judge. There's no person like that. It's just this is a natural law that all minds do, which is why we have to learn to know our own mind. Because if I am experiencing my own experiences now, all my happiness and all my suffering is the fruit of what I have done, then I'm in charge, baby. Stop blaming everybody else, start taking responsibility and changing what's in my mind, because I'm sick of suffering. I don't want more suffering. This is sort of the basis of a Buddhist practice, this sense of accountability. So by changing my mind, practicing virtue, learning to be my own therapist, going deeper and deeper into my mind, getting rid of all the voices of ego, eliminating all of this, cutting fear, causing happiness, bliss, joy, going beyond negative karma. Now I can choose to do exactly what I like, and this is where the compassion part comes in. Now, knowing I found my own liberation, now I can be of benefit to others, because we're all in the same boat together, suffering. So consciousness is this beginningless and endless continuity of mental moments, the Buddha is saying. And whatever we do, say, and think every second is what programs it and produces the experience at any given moment. So it's a bit shocking what he's saying. To think that you're in charge of your own life is kind of a brand new idea. It's either mummy and daddy or it's God, isn't it? This is an interesting concept. It's very empowering. Rather, it's empowering because we've got to be in charge, got to be on top of it. I've got to be the one responsible, which means I've got to be aware. I've got to be my own therapist. I've got to go deep into my mind to find out what the hell's going on in there. That's the idea.
Yeah, but then you have to be careful that you don't do good things because you want to get a better life, because then I'll be attached to better things. But if I am
start again, Gloria.
Okay.
What did you just say?
I constantly think about this. Okay, if I am a good person and try to be compassionate and do everything as best as I can.
That's right.
Is any attachment to good things? Because then I think, okay, this will help me to get a better life
Gloria.
next time.
We've got to take ourselves at our own level. Very profound if we could get it. But our problem is, when we're angry, depressed, jealous, we really believe that someone else is doing it to me. We don't think we play a role. So to wake up to this in the very first level of practice, to realize that being angry, being jealous, and this is Buddha's point about karma. This is a fundamental point. That okay, this is where, let's go into this again, remember. Our usual view of morality, because we've brought up as Christians, for example, Muslims, whatever, the usual view, or indeed as materialists, with mummy and daddy running the show, the government, the police, the judges, we have this sort of dualistic view of morality. And we really have this very strongly, especially when it comes to religion. We have this feeling that it's imposed from something on high. That's why we resist it. That's why we resent it. Don't tell me what to do, we'll say. Do you understand my point here? It's very strong inside us. But the Buddha's view of, and I checked on this, I remember I mentioned this, I asked a Catholic priest, a friend, I said, tell me what a sin is. Define a sin for me. He said, it's going against the will of God. It's a very powerful point. That by definition, a bad action is one that God says is what you shouldn't do. So a sin is when you do what he doesn't tell you to do. And the same with when you're in the household. I'm a naughty girl, and I'm a naughty girl because mummy said. But the Buddhist view of morality, he says a natural law. That a bad action has got nothing to do with the fact that he said it. It's got to do with the fact that people don't like being harmed. If you do your market research in this room, we're going to find nobody likes being kicked in the teeth, bad-mouthed, having their girlfriend cheated on. Do you understand my point? We don't like it. So this is obvious. That's how you define a negative action for the Buddha. But like we discussed, I think, on Thursday, this is a really major point. When I do a negative action, what causes it to be negative karma for me isn't the mere fact that it's wrong, or even that it harms another. It's the fact that I have in my heart the wish to harm. We talked about the killing of the mouse business, The reason I create negative karma when I kill something is because I want to harm it. So that wanting to harm, which is called anger, that's what pollutes my mind. And that's what the Buddha is saying. That's what causes me future suffering. I program my mind in negativity. So it's not come some moral idea from the sky, or it's wrong because somebody said spirit or a soul, and something a bit mysterious. Buddha doesn't talk like that. He says, you've got this mind. So there's different ways of talking about it, and the simplest way in this context is to think of it as a river of mental moments. So now you know very well, if you had perfect memory, you could track back in perfect memory every second of what Gloria was thinking between now and when you got up this morning. That would be possible, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Now, even if you don't remember most of the day, and most of us don't remember most of the day, we know logically, even though we don't remember, our mind was working away at 7:03 this morning, wasn't it? But we don't remember it. So consciousness or mind are the same meaning. It's this ability to cognize. It's this continuity of mental moments that you keep tracking it back. And if you kept tracking back, you'd know you'd go in an unbroken chain of mental moments. You'd got to go right back to the first second of conception in your mummy's womb. You'd keep tracking it back to then, wouldn't you? And then the question is, well, where did that come from? Well, the egg and sperm were in your mummy and daddy's bodies, weren't they, a moment before conception? And the Buddha would say you can track back that same continuity of mind, but at a subtler level, because there's levels of consciousness, obviously to the previous moment of that continuity of mind. And a few weeks before that, it was in a previous body. And then you got to conception there, and you keep tracking and tracking. And of course, logically, he says you've got to keep tracking it back, and you will never find a first moment. There can't be, because it's the product of cause and effect. And there can be never a first moment where you say there was nothing before it. You can't have such a thing. Nothing like that exists. Right? So this consciousness also is the second thing about your consciousness. Every microsecond it's doing something. And the Buddha would put it in a very simple way. It's either doing something virtuous, non-virtuous, or neither. Pretty simple way of saying it. The non-virtuous ones have this particular characteristic of being based in the ego grasping. Whether that mind's in an ant body, dog body, giraffe body, or human body, Buddhist psychology refers to all the same, no difference. And so this ego grasping drives all the mad things we do, causes us suffering, causes us to see nonsense, and causes us to harm others. And in the long term is the motor that keeps propelling us forward, like a maniac, and then that causes more birth, another birth, and another birth, and another birth. So we're creating our own experiences moment by moment, and this keeps on going until we break the cycle. So this is where the delusions come in, understanding these neuroses in our mind. Another way of talking about